Welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast, where we explore how the safe and skillful use of psychedelic substances can catalyze powerful transformation. Today, I'm speaking with Brandon Beachum, entrepreneur, host of the Positive Head Podcast, and author of The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance.
I think humanity right now, kind of like the dangerous teenager. They just turned 16. They have an adult body, maybe, or darn close to it. They got the keys to the car, but man, their physical development has outpaced their mental, maturity, and they're kind of dangerous. So I think, our technological evolution has surpassed our spiritual evolution, and that's dangerous. And, what are we doing with shows and conversations like this and advocating for plant medicine and psychedelics, helping to really, I think, play the catch-up game. So I think that's where we're at currently. It's an interesting time to be alive.
Hey listeners, this is Paul Austin, founder and CEO at Third Wave, and welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast. In the episode today, we explore a couple key questions. What is the role of conscious community in catalyzing spiritual evolution? How can we utilize psychedelics to accelerate awakening? And what does it mean to see beyond reality's illusion and tap into infinite abundance? Today, we have Brandon Beachum on the podcast. Brandon Beachum is the host of the Positive Head Podcast and author of The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. He is also an entrepreneur, having co-founded the travel company ResortShare and also founding Hello Vacay and Industry. I actually went to Brandon's home, the Mystic Manor in LA, a few years back before knowing him, and then was introduced through our respective teams. And Brandon was invited to be on the podcast, and I will also be on his podcast, and he was really a pleasure to get to know. So as always, if you want to go deeper into the episode with full show notes, transcript, and any links that we mentioned in this conversation, just follow the link in the description or head to thethirdwave.co/podcast. and scroll to episode 216 with Brandon Beachum. Here's a taste of what Brandon and I cover today. We explore Brandon's creative ventures, including the Mystic Manor co-living space, the Positive Head Podcast, and Industry, a collective platform to support artists and musicians. We dive into Brandon's journey from his Christian conservative background to becoming a spiritual explorer through the use of psychedelics. We envision a retro future where humans thrive through communal wisdom, and we examine how the villains in our lives can be our greatest catalysts for growth. This episode is all about mastering the universe, using psychedelics to dissolve illusions and awaken to infinite abundance. All right, before we dive in, take a moment to follow the Psychedelic Podcast on your favorite app or like and subscribe on YouTube. It's a simple and small action that you can take right now to amplify psychedelic awareness and shift the cultural conversation around psychedelic substances. We are all in this together. That's it for now. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Brandon Beachum. Brandon, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me, buddy.
So you live at a place called the Mystic Manor, and a few years ago I was hanging out with a friend in Venice, and we just happened to show up there. I think there were some folks who were doing some wood shop and some building in your garage, and we're like, let's stop by, let's say hi. Beautiful venue, huge, open gardens, and the name in and of itself feels very, very Venice. So I'd love if, just as like an opening story, you can tell us a little bit about the ethos behind the Mystic Manor and how that came about. How'd you find yourself opening a beautiful space in the midst of conscious LA?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for having me on the show. And the Mystic Manor, I always say I fancy myself as the steward of the spaceship, because the property looks pretty epic, pretty like unique architecture, spaceshipy. And my original vision, July 2019 is when I originally moved in, and I'd been doing the Positive Head Podcast for about 4 years at that point, 2015. And for years, I had supporters and fans of the show reaching out and saying, hey, when are you going to do some kind of retreat sort of thing? And I had also gotten inspired to do something other than, audio. At this point, I've done Positive Head. There's probably 2,100 episodes or so. So I've done
2,100. Okay, that's a whole nother story then.
Yeah. I've done a lot of podcasting, and with help from my co-host who does 2 episodes a week. I currently do 3, so 5 total.
Wow.
Years of that point, I had done audio only podcasts, and I got inspired to do something a little more creative. And so the vision was to do a late night style, consciousness centric talk show called Optimystic, hence the Mystic Manor. And what I did was, and then I was like, okay, how will I put all this together? Well, first off, at the time I lived in Orange County, which is kind of in between LA and where you're at, San Diego, as you know, and, about an hour south of here. And so I was like, well, I need to be near the LAX airport if I'm going to have live in-person interviews in front of a studio audience. So I want to place the vision to call in was a place that was big enough to host retreats to help fund the whole venture, where, supporters and fans could come and spend a week on retreat. And then the last night of their stay, we would have 30 or so people come, live audience, and I do an opening monologue and visionary artists live painting. You've been here to the Mystic Manor once, and so you probably remember there's visionary art everywhere. And so we have a visionary artist live painting. We'd talk about their piece. Then I would have my main interview. Then retreat guests would come out towards the end of the interview and share a little bit about their week and ask questions of my guest, and then a musical performance on the outro. So we filmed about 17 of those episodes. Between July 2019 and then the COVID asteroid hit, and life's what happens when your plans don't work out, and it's like, okay, we can't do retreats anymore or live tapings of a show. So yeah, we went into the COVID chrysalis, and at that time I'm definitely one of these people who tries to bite off more than maybe a sane person should. And so I got excited about other things. Oh, I'll write a book. Oh, I have other projects, other entrepreneurial ventures. I have a travel company called Hello Vacay. That's taken a lot of my attention. So haven't gotten back to doing more of those episodes, but it was great fun. Cool experience. People can check it out at optimystic.tv and see the there's still some of them we haven't even edited and released, but we'll get to that eventually. It's a lot more complex than an audio only podcast. So, but yeah, that's sort of how the Mystic Manor originally started. And then, as fun as it was living in a retreat center, 3 weeks out of the month, there were guests from all over the world here on retreat. It was a lot. And so after COVID kind of started to mellow out, I decided, I wasn't quite ready to go back to full retreats. And that's when we sort of opened it up to a co-living and event space. Every 6 to 8 weeks or so, we do our own production of a sort of transformational festival for a day with workshops and vendors and DJs. And so we do, our next big event is Halloween. So that's, and then other small things happen all the time. Sound healing and, different aligned events from time to time. And that's sort of, where the Mystic Manor is at in its current iteration.
So I feel like an hour probably won't be long enough for us to talk about all of the creative projects that you've either built in the past or you currently have going on. So I'd love to hear, from your lens and your perspective, what are maybe 3 to 4 of the most exciting or creative projects that you're either currently working on or have built out in the past that you really feel like not define you as a creator, but are some of your greatest contributions as a creator?
Love that question. So I would say the most rewarding thing that I've done is the Positive Head podcast. It's I'm super blessed. It's reached, 25 million or so downloads. So it's gotten out there pretty good. And to get, as I'm sure you can relate, getting feedback from listeners who, oh my gosh, I found this podcast and it had this huge impact on my journey. In my case, I really focus on talking about consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality and spirituality, and sort of teach best what I most need to learn, as I like to say. And here's my thoughts and my sort of spin on who we are and what's going on and how we can apply these certain perspectives to create more magic in our lives. And so that's been really the most rewarding. Then, 2 years ago, I wrote The Golden Key, a book, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. And that was really, the idea of that was, okay, I'm really verbose, 2,200 episodes and counting, or 21, whatever it is. It's a lot to listen to. What if I distilled my ideas down into 100 pages, 3 hours to listen to, and found a unique way to kind of get it out there and gift it to the world, which you can, I've done. If you guys are interested in checking that out, you can go to goldenkey.gift and use the code LOVE, LOVE at checkout, and you can get the audio or ebook. And so yeah, Positive Head and the Golden Key really summarize like, hey, how can I help teach, like I said, teach best what I most need to learn, And so those have been really rewarding. I made music for many years. I was in a band called Kundalini. So when you ask creative ventures, that was a big impact in my life and led me to coming from the East Coast to California many moons ago. And a lot of great growth and creative expression with that. It's been a long time ago, but it was a big impact in my life. Let's see, what else? I have a travel company called Hello Vacay, which feels
very different from the Golden Key and Positive Heads.
It is. I've walked in multiple worlds. Yeah, I've had some success in I guess the default world, if you will, with a previous company called ResortShare that went from me living on my friend's couch to an Inc. fastest growing private company. And It was really, the vision for it though, was to fund another project called Industry, which is, it's a whole nother story, but, you asked a question, you opened a big can of worms because I've done too many things, but Industry was sort of a, platform pre-Spotify that was like allowing fans to support artists, and definitely probably my craziest spiritual breadcrumb story, where I sort of followed nudges from the universe, and I launched this platform that was like, Industry, spelled TREE, the idea of reinventing the music industry. And I launched it. It was kind of like Spotify meets MySpace before Spotify. I had my own token called Blooms before crypto. This is like 2009, and it grew to thousands of users. And then I hit an issue with my funding, and that's when I was like, I need to manifest the money to do this right. And that's when I got into the travel space and had some real success there, and never went back. And I've really been guided in recent years to revisit that project as a DAO. Version 2.0 that allows fans to co-own, music rights with artists and create community around it. So that's something in the headlights, if you will, that I'm looking at helping to foster the next version of that in the coming year or so, really putting more energy into that.
So there's some common patterns here that are emerging, right? ResortShare. Just by the name of it, I have a sense of what it's about, though. I'd love to weave that in further. I know, just doing a little research on Hello Vacay, it looks like that's a somewhat decentralized or NFT approach to travel. You talked about Industry and what that includes, a Positive Head podcast. So I'm curious, before we get into some of these patterns, because that is a question that I have, what are some of these patterns that you've noticed are emerging from all of your projects? What is sort of the anchoring or rooting of those patterns? In other words, how much acid did you do, and when did you do it?
I love that. That's a great question. Yeah, and it's funny, but it's true. I am 49 years young at this point. I feel like I'm 21. My life is like more fun than it was at 21. But at around that time, I started experimenting with psychedelics, mushrooms, and LSD, and it really catalyzed, having some experience with someone who claimed to have some psychic ability. Really, I was raised very conservative Christian, and combined open mind, psychedelics, and seeing some things that sort of shake the foundation of my paradigm. And I started really exploring, a lot of spiritual texts and ideas. And this is, mid late 90s. It was a very different world. I was reading these things that you didn't have access to the authors. And so for me, I can only think, because it's really such a part of my dharmic path to help people to remember who and what they are and tap into their innate, divinity, if you will. That once I started having my own remembering and awakening, with the confluence of these different things, psychedelics, books, meeting people who were displaying some psychic ability that shook my foundation. I just got so lit up about it at the time. I remember I would just talk to anyone who would listen, like, how is everyone not freaking out on this? Like, holy shit, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we just have amnesia to who and what we were prior. And so I would talk to anyone who would listen, at the time, and it was sort of like, what are you smoking, dude? Or, that's interesting, and people would go about their daily lives. Now it's, all these years later, it's like, every 21-year-old I cross paths with at an event or whatever, yeah, of course I know I'm like, source incarnate and physical, like that's old news, but it really has become such a, much more common view on reality. And so, but yeah, because it is such a part of my dharmic path, I think I got really lit up about it early on. And of course, started the podcast, talking about these kinds of concepts relatively early as far as podcasting goes, as did you. So, but yeah, psychedelics really played a role in that. And I've had, half a dozen ayahuasca experiences. And, of course that's profound as well. And, I recommend I don't know if psychedelics are for every single person, but it's such a great tool to help break the pattern, and it's, if I had a nickel for every time someone told me mushrooms changed their life, I could retire. So.
Yeah. We have a similar story, and listeners of the podcast will be familiar with this or have heard this before. I also grew up in I would say, traditional religious family in West Michigan. So more the Midwest than the East Coast. And similar to you, at the age of 19, I started to drop acid. From the age of 19 to 21, I probably did acid and mushrooms 15 to 20 times. And a lot of it was around healing this sort of restricted, sheltered, overly conditioned environment that I grew up in, which allowed me to see sort of the fundamental truth of who I was. And then from that came a lot of other things, but one of the core things was this whole concept of the third wave of psychedelics and the importance of decentralization and the mycelial network. And, there's, as you may be aware, there's a really interesting history between LSD and even the computer revolution and what computers have now made feasible. And one thing that I saw in, I was doing a little bit of research before we hopped on the pod together, and one thing that I saw was your interest in these, let's say, future conscious wellness communities, right? And what that might entail. And clearly that's what you've built with the Mystic Manor to a large degree. So I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about, we've heard about what the Mystic Manor is, but a little bit more about the vision of what that represents in your mind's eye, and why you think co-living and co-creating is really the future for, human thriving.
Yeah. Industry was really my first sort of vision with, how do I create community around art? And how, the way I kind of view us is we are a puzzle putting itself back together again. And you have codes and, a piece that fits, perfectly with the piece that I carry. And if the sum being greater than the equal parts, how do we put the pieces back together again? And I think to do that, I think this is sort of the dance that Source plays with itself throughout eternity: separation, unification, separation, unification. And I think we're in a trajectory where it's like, okay, time to come back together, time to wake up. The alarm bell's going off. It's time to remember who and what you are. And the only way you're going to survive is if you come together and bring your gifts together. And like I said, the sum will be equal, greater than the equal parts. And so for me, I think that the thing that connects and binds us more than anything, it's like the universal language is music. And so in art, and if we can get people to rally around that with some sort of a framework, that allows us to have fun, create community, and then you get everyone if we can get everyone operating from the foundational premise that what's good for you is good for me because I am you, the separation between us is illusory in nature. And it is, Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And the reason I believe that holds true is because there are no others. So if you can get to a point where people really understand that and they're all operating on that as a foundational, operating system, then now you're coming from a place of, okay, now we can find a way to connect and weave and co-create and come together that is congruent. We have the same core, principle and ideas about the nature of reality. Let's shift the consciousness by, it's like I can make an impact certainly on my own, but it's like even the Bible referenced this. And I think what it said is like where there two or more are gathered in my name, I'll be there. And it's supposedly, a quote from God, in the Bible. And it's that concept. I think it's what it's really getting at is like Source is amplified if we're coming together congruently and we are, moving in the same direction. And we've seen this with meditators in, descending on DC in the 90s and saying, okay, we're going to lower crime by 20% or 30% or whatever it was. And, the chief of police said it would take a snowstorm to do that. And what do you know, by the end of the experiment of all these souls coming together and focusing their intention in that way, crime was reduced exactly like they said it would be.
Really?
And
I've never heard this anecdote before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's like, so we have the ability to shift the field collectively. We just need some framework and some reason to, come together. And so I think the future is going to be all about more of getting back to our roots, what are our roots? We were hunter-gatherers. We lived in, these sort of tribal communities where, it was fierce egalitarianism and we shared resources. And it was, it was only, they say modern man's been around like 300,000 years or so. It's only, and of course there's different arguments and perspectives on that, but that's sort of like base level science. Everyone will agree to that typically. And it's like, well, only the last 10,000 years or so recorded history have we had farming, and then it was like turned into, what's mine versus what's yours versus, and I think, and now we've gotten to the point where we're living in boxes cut off from the person to the right and left of us. We don't even know their names. It was nothing like that, in with our ancestors. And so getting back to that more natural state, I think, is essential for us to survive the point in, sort of I think humanity right now, kind of like the dangerous teenager. They just turned 16. They have an adult body, maybe, or darn close to it. They got the keys to the car, but man, their physical development has outpaced their mental, maturity, and they're kind of dangerous, And so I think, our technological evolution has surpassed our spiritual evolution, and that's dangerous. And, what are we doing with shows and conversations like this and advocating for plant medicine and psychedelics, helping to really, I think, play the catch-up game? So I think that's where we're at currently. It's an interesting time to be alive.
There's a couple thoughts that come up here. One is a quote from Edmund O. Wilson, and I dropped this quote in a recent episode, so excuse the listeners for having to be subjected to this again, but it is a very good quote. It said basically humanity has Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And there's a way in which psychedelics are helping to, I think, accelerate the sort of spiritual evolution of humanity in order to allow us to be able to handle the external technology that we now have available to us. Stuart Brand, there's another quote from Stuart Brand, which is, we are as gods, or we are like gods, so we might as well get good at it. Yeah. And I think these are sort of powerful frames, especially for folks who have maybe grown up in a mainstream religion. It's like there is this difference between a big G God, let's say, or the gods or source or energy, and we as individual humans. And yet I think it's, as you said, undeniable that source lives within each one of us, and that psychedelics help us to become a little bit more aware of that. Yeah. Huxley, I'm reading a book right now. I'm just finishing it. Aldous Huxley, the final book he wrote was a book called Island, which was the utopian sort of balance to Brave New World, the dystopian book that he published in the early 30s. And Island is all about, it's a novel, it's fiction, but it's about this island in the South Pacific called Pala that essentially is a utopian society where they have rites of passage with a medicine called moksha, and everyone lives in an egalitarian way. And the whole sort of premise or plot of the story is the external world is trying to come in and take make them transition to become an industrialized country and sell oil and all of these things. So a lot of the novel is about that relationship. And I think that story is a really good utopian vision of the ways that we could live. And I think the challenge is a little bit is, Jacques Rousseau would often talk about this going back to nature, right? And how we just need to go back to nature, and there's this sort of primal, wild aspect that just needs to be uncaged and undomesticated. And yet, modern life has a lot of amenities and conveniences that a lot of people would find it difficult to go without. So, long story short, I do think there has to be what is that balance between the ancient, primeval, and the modern technology that does help us to live in a better way in many cases.
100%. Yeah. This sort of retro-futuristic approach, I think, is where the sweet spot. I'm with you. I'm not trying to give up. I am a creature of comfort if I'm anything. And so I'm not, it doesn't mean we've got to get back to, undo things that are advancements and really make life easier for us. I think it's the things that got cut off in that process that are really essential to our psychology and well-being and health. And I think a lot of that has to do with community structure. And, we don't, it doesn't, that's the beautiful thing about my life at this point with the Mystic Manor, and, it's conscious community, let's call it. It's it gives us a reason to come together and to experience, and with that same core idea. And it doesn't mean there's not drama and all the things that you could experience in high school. But for the most part, when you have people are really doing the work on themselves, and it leads them to that desire for, I want more community. I want to support others more. And I feel really blessed at this point to have as much community as I do in my life. I mean, I think so many, people maybe that, let's say I went to high school with, who went a completely different path, how isolated and old maybe they feel, because life is just the excitement. They've cut themselves off. And like I said, my life is more vibrant and exciting and fun than it's ever been. And there's no reason everyone can't experience that. And that's really my aim, is to help as many people as possible make decisions and see things from perspectives that help them to tap into more of that, community, that our life is meant to be a celebration. Yeah, there's challenges as well, but doing it alone sucks.
And that's certainly one of the common patterns in your project, whether that's through the Positive Head podcast, or I would imagine even ResortShare. Tell us a little bit more about ResortShare. You mentioned that it was quite successful, and I'm kind of curious. I have a sense of what it could be like, maybe like an early precursor to Airbnb for ResortShare.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because we were doing the same time Airbnb was scraping Craigslist to put together listings for what their first listings on their site were. We were posting, working with timeshare owners who had way too much timeshare. They'd been oversold. That industry is a pretty notoriously shady one. And a lot of people get just sold tons of time they don't need. And so we said, look, let us help you to manage and rent out your unused time. And so we, the same time they were scraping Craigslist to create inventory on their site, we were posting timeshares for rent, and it went from, an idea for me really as a way to fund industry, this art community, project that I had a lot of sort of, like I said, spiritual breadcrumbs, sort of synchronicities pointing me to launch. It was just a method for me to really test my manifestation skills, and like, okay, I'm one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things. I can manifest more financial resources to do what I want. And, and it took off, it was just, we were right thing, right time. And it went from me on my friend's couch, to 100 plus employees, and Inc. 569th fastest growing private company in the US. And, it was, it definitely was like a, sort of a story out of like a movie script a little bit, because I, in that 5-year journey, it went from me on my friend's couch to, doing $1 million a month in sales volume and rentals, and to us getting offered to be bought out for a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars. And we, within 12 hours of a $30 million offer to be bought out, we lost 90% of our revenue, which then led to that deal imploding, which then led to a business partner betraying me and trying to like sort of steal what was left of the company. And, it was like, he had asked me months earlier, he said, I had just launched the podcast towards the end of ResortShare. ResortShare, I left in 2015 and launched something new called Hello Vacay in 2016. But he asked me at the time, months before it went down, he's like, hey, Brandon, what would you do? You just launched this new podcast. If it became a really big deal and one of our other partners tried to lay claim to ownership of it because you were still on payroll with ResortShare when you started it. This is how he would thought, this is like his sort of mentality. I was like, I would actually give it to him because I'm infinitely abundant and there's only more where that came from. Little did I know, months later, ResortShare would get hit by an asteroid. We lose this big offer, offered $30 million. Oh, never mind. You lost 90% of your revenue, evaporation, and then the same partner who asked me that question to discover he was trying to maneuver to take what was left of my equity in ResortShare. And I, me and my brother at the time said, you don't have to take it. You can have it. We just want away from your toxic energy. And we started Hello Vacay out of the ashes of that. It was definitely one of the most challenging hero's journey tales I could imagine. Getting to walk the talk. It didn't manifest the exact way we talked about in that hypothetical scenario, but I basically said, you don't have to, you don't have to take what you're trying to take. Now, keep in mind, I was the original founder and I had given him his equity to begin with. And then he was trying to take the rest. And by the way, he's the only one who became a millionaire off of it because he sold some shares months before everything went down. So, and he was trying to take what was left. And I ended up saying, you know what? You can have it. Just get me away from you. And, it was crazy because fast forward 6 years, and my book, The Golden Key, I share this whole hero's journey tale and how I believe it happened for me, not to me, and it's all soul contract, divine design. And the day I submitted my book for, I'm done, I'm turning it in, go to print, I get a call from that partner, and I see his name pop up, and I'm shocked because I haven't talked to him in 6 years. And my partner, Karen, was like, answer. I answered. He goes, hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been on an intense spiritual journey since all those years ago. And, my intuitive friend said something about us writing a book together, and I just wanted to reconnect. And I'm like, well, I just printed the book minutes ago, and you're the villain in my hero's journey tale. So yeah, it's crazy. It was crazy. Happened. Yeah. And, he's really turned a new leaf, and we're friends again. And, okay. I truly believe it all is, I had Dr. Eben Alexander on my podcast years ago, and he talks about, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a Harvard neurosurgeon who, he had a huge bestseller because here's this, he wasn't woo-woo at all. And here all of a sudden the Harvard brain specialist gets meningitis, and his brain is one day fine, the next day he's in a coma, it's fried. And after a week, they tell his family his brain is gone, it's fried, pull the plug. And they pull the plug, and he miraculously comes back. And all he remembers is his time on the other side. And when I interviewed him, I remember one of the things he said is, what he was shown in the week in a coma on the other side, supposedly, and he documents it in his book. I think it's called Proof of Heaven. He says, I was shown a lot of times the villains in your story are actually your best friends on the other side, and they choose to play these roles. They volunteer to play roles for you to have a certain experience. Like in my case, I got to walk the talk of what I had told him those months. Like, look, I'm infinitely abundant. I gave away what was left of my company, that I'd just been offered $30 million for months earlier, and it was tough, obviously. And it's just one of those things though, where, and what I write about believing like, hey, this is, this person, it doesn't mean I'm still one of them in my life, but I think they played a role by divine design and And then of course, the day I submit the book, they call me. Like it's a trip.
Yeah. I've found that there's many paths to spiritual development, right? And sort of the classic bifurcation is monk in the mountain versus person who is living it and, amidst. And we know, like, if you go and you meditate on the side of a mountain, maybe bring some acid with you, and you're just sort of in that space, you can easily reach this state of equanimity and peace. Not easily, but it's much more in reach oftentimes. Whereas when we're in the sort of muck and profanity of everyday existence, especially with business, because business has its own structure, its own energy, that I think, especially in today's world, getting too sucked in can lead to a lot of toxicity, can lead to a lot of sort of egoic and immature tendencies. And so there's almost a way in which pursuing the path of an entrepreneur, but with sort of a heightened awareness of what it means to be present and aware, compassionate and loving, I find that it really is the ultimate path for spiritual development, precisely for the reasons that you mentioned, that money really gets to our root chakra, right? It's like the deepest thing because it's safety and security. And so a lot of people attach to that. They tether to that because they think, I'm going to be safe if I just have enough money. And what a lot of us know who have gone through this path is money doesn't create safety. It's a nice energy source to have. It's good to have enough of it, certainly, but that in and of itself won't create the necessary foundation to feel safe. And so what I'm hearing a lot of, like, I had a similar story where I started a company in the psychedelic space, and it got to the point, I was lucky enough to get a very, very small buyout for a very small amount of equity. But it got to a point where I gave back. Initially, I was basically half owner. I just gave away 30% of the equity. And then at some point, the co-founder tried to steal more or less the rest.
Similar.
So I was just like, look, I don't really care. There's all these other opportunities. I don't even want to deal with this energy. So it was just like, fuck it, you
Yeah.
know?
Wow.
And of course, about 6 months ago now, that company went bankrupt in a flame of really terrible PR. And so it was just sort of one of those things where there's a dharma, there's a karma to the natural evolution of how things flow. And I think what really matters is to stay in integrity to our values and to our principles, and not feel like we have to get sucked into the manipulations or the machinations of people who we find ourselves engaged with. And I think it's a great frame, right, that you provided, that these villains in our lives, they often can be the greatest catalysts for
Right.
awareness and growth. It's just a matter of, it's like, it's a bit of a kinky thing. It's like an existential kink. Like, can you confront
Yeah.
it? Can you look into it? Can you deal with it and still be present and centered in the midst of that?
Right. Right. That's exactly right. It really tests your ability to tap into, your own integrity and your own trust in the mystery, and this idea that, you don't have to chase anything. It's, at the end of the day, you are the magic. You are the secret sauce, and that can't be stolen, And if you really feel and know and trust in that, it's like no one can really ever take anything from you. That's the real value, which is your heart, your mind, you know, your essence.
So,
Okay.
playing off of what we've been talking about, what is the golden key? What is the golden key for consciousness, for awareness, for just being a human? And don't feel obligated to, recite all 3 hours of the audiobook. Like we talked about, you can go and you can get that as a free gift. But how would you sort of like pinpoint the golden key of existence?
Yeah, I shared what I did with the golden key. It's really 8 keys that I laid out. Okay, what have I found to work most effectively? Key perspectives, and perspectives, I guess, is the best word. And so, I'll just rattle off the keys. Obviously, if you want to go deep with understanding them, or get the book. But just at a high level, these keys are perspectives that I found by adopting. Have enhanced my happiness, success, health, etc. And the first key is see the oneness. The second key is know the illusion. The third key is focus your flow. The fourth key is align your intentions. The fifth key is BBB. The sixth key is trust the mystery. The seventh key is love what comes. And the eighth key, or golden key, that kind of ties them all together, is master the universe. Master the YOU universe. And I love putting it that way. And really, to kind of sum it up, a lot of us have this idea of like, oh my gosh, the world's too big. I can't affect it. It's out there. There's too many people. There's too much competition. There's too much, And what I really try and drive home in the book is actually it's the exact opposite is what's going on. You are the lead actor, actress, star, director, writer in your own private YOU universe. You are it. It is you. Source is so infinite that it can play out infinite universes where, in this one where you're experiencing, Source is experiencing through you and your avatar, you're the star here. And everything and everyone is a prop in your movie, reflecting you back to you in some way, shape, or form. So in the case of me speaking to you, I'm just a projection that is a prop that is reflecting Paul back to Paul, and you're actually the star here. And of course, you make it. You are it. Everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. And so, when you take on that empowering perspective of like, I'm Source is all alone, experiencing itself and pretending like there's other. And in this moment, in this particular universe, it's wearing this bio bodysuit and seeing through this lens. And what I find when you apply that perspective and tap into, how powerful you actually, you're so powerful, you built this place. You just have amnesia to the fact that you built this place. The same way when you're sleeping at night and the bear's chasing you through the woods, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, shoot, I thought that was real. I thought the bear was about to get me, but really I'm laying in bed and I forgot. That's what's happening. This is a dream God once had, and you're God dreaming. And the difference between understanding your, the king and queen of your domain, your universe, versus, oh my God, all this external stuff is out there and it's so big and it's so vast, and it's, I could never impact it or, make a difference. It's huge. The difference in looking at the life experience through those various lenses.
Thank you for that. It brought up a lot, even to have that as a transmission. And it sounds like in some ways this book for you was and has been a transmission, right? The 2100 podcasts that you've recorded in a way are a transmission. And then the refining of that is in and of itself, a transmission. And I'm reminded a little bit of the philosophy of idealism. So panpsychism is, consciousness is emergent, consciousness is in everything. Idealism is we are always creating our own reality. There's a way in which we've been restricted to creating as limited beings. And my sense is why psychedelics have been prohibited for so long is because they allow people to see through that illusion and tap into what people may consider to be magic, or manifestation. And the power that can come from that is, I think, it's alluring in many ways, which is why, there are some not so great people attracted to psychedelics, but it also, I love how you've said this a couple of times now. It helps us to remember, right? We're a species that has collective amnesia about where we come from, and the remembering of our divinity and our godhood is central to waking up as a collective consciousness.
Fully, yeah. I like to put it, we're remembering. We're coming back together with these other aspects, these lost aspects of ourself. And this is the game of cat and mouse. I think that Source plays with itself throughout eternity. It forgets so that it can remember, and it means something again. And so you can't know that which you are unless you know that which you are not. So it's a necessary tool. Evil is live spelled backwards. It's like, the higher the branches, the deeper the roots. All of this, I think it really, when you start to understand that it's all happening for love to mean something, it doesn't mean that we're now supportive of, and from our level of consciousness, we're voting for more murder and mayhem and all these things. But it helps to take the sting out of the things that otherwise are almost unbearable. To why? Like, why does it have to be this way? And when you think of from the perspective of like, this is just, who we are at our core is really untouchable and unmovable. And so when you are all that is, and you are in eternity, and you do a lot of interesting things to feel and to experience, and that requires the contrast. And I think psychedelics, are such a key part, have been a key part for so many people, that, you and I, before I think we're recording, I said, if I had a nickel for every time someone I know said they took mushrooms or, and it changed their life. In my case, I microdose somewhat regularly now, and I'm sure a lot of people, it's become such a big thing. And, it's just to have that little bit of magic in your system, I think helps to open the door. And, in my case, my friend launched a a microdose sort of nootropic that has a bunch of chaga and lion's mane and like all these other, bacopa, in it, which, by the way, if people want to check it out, they can go to thegreat.mother on Instagram, and nice. You can reach out and, connect with them about the potential of gaining access to that stuff. But it's not about getting messed up or high or, it's like, oh, how do I use these tools that Source has put here to help tap in? And that's just one path. For some people, that's not their path. And it's meditation is what it takes, or more exercise, or, there's many ways for us to tap into more of our divinity. But, obviously, you've dedicated a podcast to one of the most appealing ways, which is using these teachers and these allies that, I believe have been left for us on this path to remembering.
Yeah, and they are allies, and it's an intelligence that we're working with. There's a symbiosis that's very present whenever we engage, and many times they are excellent catalysts, and like anything else, tread reverently, so to say, right? Like, yes, these are great tools, and I've worked with LSD in such a way that it's really helped me to experience joy and bliss and fun and laughter, absolutely. And there's a reason that Icarus's wings burned when he flew too close to the sun. So I think there's a way in which balance, especially when working with psychedelics, is helpful. And that's why I love microdosing, because microdosing, I think, is physiologically very beneficial. It's a way to weave a little bit of magic in on a regular basis.
I'm with you.
Without having to again and again and again dip into this well of mysticism. Every now and then it's great to have these experiences, these peak experiences, but when done too often, they can be more disassociative than transformative.
I agree. I think that's a good way to really gauge your relationship is, are you using the substance to enhance the moment or escape from the moment? And if you're leaning into falling into sort of an escapism, disassociation, then I think it's something, ketamine is a great example of a substance that, is pretty popular, that can be a wonderful tool and also really used for escapism, and then kind of, go the other way. It's a double-edged sword. So I think, that's the thing to really be mindful of. What is the relationship and the intention with these very powerful substances that deserve respect?
Absolutely. Well, Brandon, it's been an honor to have you on the show with, as a fellow podcast host, the Positive Head podcast, as a creator of a incredible co-living and co-creative space, the Mystic Manor, and even as an author of The Golden Key, which again, folks can find, I believe is it thegoldenkey.gift?
Just goldenkey.gift. And goldenkey.gift, and use the code LOVE at checkout, and you can get the audio and or ebook.
Incredible. And I just, we're going to turn the mic around for the Positive Head podcast pretty soon. So if listeners want to check that out and hear part 2 of this conversation, they'll be able to do that as well. So I just appreciate you taking the time and popping on the pod today to go deep on all these very deep things that we got to explore.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and very much looking forward to our next go round, where we flip the mic a little bit and dive in deeper with some of your insights and wisdom. And this is fun.
Thanks so much for watching. For a deeper dive into the power of microdosing with complimentary practice and extra guidance, check out our best-selling microdosing course. It's a science-based protocol with dozens of best practices so you can customize your protocol to your unique needs and goals. Check out the link in the description below.